please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
That's the market opening, 27 points higher, 28 higher on the Nifty, 10,740 now.
I think the market is still, or the circumstances are still not positive enough for a breakout on the upside.
Standing committee meeting on energy to specifically discuss the RBI circular, which could have impact on the NPA of the power sector, has been postponed to a later date.
We do around 25 lakh transactions a month.
So IFL holding will cease to exist, and 3 companies will get independently listed.
City gas distribution companies have been in focus, and Mahanagar Gas is one stock that has fallen 25% this year.
Market, which is almost at the day's highest point, 59 points, almost 60 now, 10,770 is where we're at. The Sensex is up about 240 points, 35,524.
Well, I'll start with the winners. Today was again one of those days that stocks or companies that are linked to the Navi Mumbai new airport, those stocks were excited once again.
Dalal Street rises in tandem with the global markets. Nifty closes 0.5% higher. Sensex gains 260 points. Reliance Industries is the top performing stock of the day.
Asian markets end higher as China's central bank calls for calm over the rising trade tensions. Shares in Shanghai pair losses. Japan leads the way.
Aviation stocks take a beating as passenger traffic growth slows down in the month of May. InterGlobe Aviation is down over 7% after Enforcement Directorate summons the airline's top management over alleged violation of the foreign investment rules.
Bank stocks make a comeback in trade. The Nifty Bank index outperforms the Nifty. Buying, however, restricted to private sector banks as PSU banks await the outcome of the Standing Committee meeting on tackling stressed assets in the power sector.
Pharmaceutical companies continue to rise. Cipla perks up after it receives an approval from the US drug regulator for its generic drug to treat HIV infections. Okay, those were the top 5 headlines from the day's trading action. Hello and welcome to a fresh new edition of Markets Today Talk Back. This is the show where we will wrap up the most important stories and essentially tell you what went on in those 8 hours of trading. I'm Prashant Nair. With me is my colleague Surabhi. Surabhi, hi.
Hi, Prashant. Well, quite an interesting day and a complete comeback from, the taper tantrum issues, the trade war issues that we were talking about yesterday, right? So today was pretty decent across the board.
Talking about yesterday, no tweets. I think that was a decisive
yeah, that's actually true. Absolutely. So that really couldn't, derail the bulls today. And I guess today, for a change, banks came back. Big banks came back. Reliance came back. So it worked pretty well for the bulls.
Oh, absolutely. I think, we have sort of guests who are going to join in just a bit on the show. But before we do that, let's actually quickly wrap up what really happened in terms of trade. So this is, just a top-down way of wrapping up things. Overnight, I mean, essentially when I say overnight, I mean US and before that Asia and Europe, which is yesterday, was, sharp cuts. Although the degree of magnitude of cuts kept reducing. I mean, Asia was the worst, Europe was a little better, and US, came off the low point of the day. And today we saw recovery. So market sentiment has really turned around, and maybe one reason could be that we didn't hear any new noises and words coming in from, more specifically the US. We did hear the Chinese central bank, for example, say that, well, stay calm, and we're going to do everything we can to maintain liquidity situation, etc. But from the US, because that's where this has started, we haven't heard anything new. Asia, most of markets recovered between 0.5%, 1.5%. Chinese markets, though, were one of the worst performers. After they suffered the most yesterday, between 4 and 6%, depending on which index you look at. But from the lows, the market didn't come back in any great fashion. We actually ended flat on China compared to the near 1% gains we had on some of the other bigger indices. Here in India, we lost about 90 points, and we've come back strongly, recovering about 3/4 of those losses in trade. So mid caps and small caps, they lost a lot more yesterday, and they only recovered about half of that. So weaker kind of recovery on that as compared to the loss yesterday. And in terms of sectors, banks, energy, and metal stocks really led the gains. Private banks more than public sector banks. But let's go through some stocks, Surabhi.
Yeah, so I'll quickly run through the list. As you're saying, it's all about private sector banks today. So those are the big names that were flying high. HDFC Bank made a good move, and that was, of course, a big stock that held the index. It had good company in the form of IndusInd Bank, Kotak Mahindra Bank. So these were the private sector names that really stood out today. Even a Yes Bank, for that matter, some green there as well. Metal stocks saw a recovery after the drubbing they got yesterday. So the likes of Hindalco, Vedanta, even something like a JSPL, so some of these stocks saw decent gains. And really, it was a big boys club. That's what I'd like to call it, because Reliance was leading from the front. Reliance Industries 2% higher. You know, fresh levels, fresh highs for the stock continue. Good buying on HDFC, Maruti. So these were some of the names that worked. Sitting out of the rally today were stocks like Infosys. There was some unwinding of the excitement we saw in oil marketing companies earlier this week. So some of those stocks were under pressure. Just a quick word on mid-caps. I mean, decent day overall. Some of the high flyers included stocks like Bata. That stock has actually put on 7-8% so far in the week. Some of the other names like Rain Industries were active. But watch out for airlines, as we spoke in the headline itself. About an 8% cut on InterGlobe today. And its peers, Jet and SpiceJet, were also in negative territory. So that's a quick run-through of the stock action. But Prashant, I guess overall for the market, it's it's so range bound. It's amazing how almost disciplined this market is between rebounding from the lower side of the range and kind of getting a little sluggish at around the 10,800 mark.
You're right, Surabhi. I mean, let's get some perspective on things. Mitesh is with us, Mitesh Thakkar and Gaurang Shah on the fundamentals. Gentlemen, thanks very much. Both of our guests are also going to take questions from our viewers. But as always, let's just quickly make sense of how we close today and what it would mean for tomorrow. Mitesh, over to you.
Yeah, good evening, Prashant. I think Surabhi summed it up very nicely when she said that how disciplined this market is. We had highlighted there's some kind of support around the 10,700, 680 mark. There was a gap which happened last Thursday, and then there were important moving averages close to about 10,680. Yesterday, despite the fact that we closed right at the day's low, I think we managed to bounce back and hold those support levels. So this market still remains directionless, broadly choppy between this 130, 140 point kind of a range. 10,825, 850 on the upside should be a stiff level for the index to get past. 10,700, 680 should be a good support. Until we get some kind of directional bias, I think this range bound movement might continue. My sense is that for the next 4 to 5 sessions, it might be choppy within this range, with individual stocks clearly giving you trading opportunities.
All right, let's move to the second headline today, and it's all about global markets, which pared some of the sharp losses that we saw in the previous session. Trade fears, however, continue to linger on the periphery. Asian stocks, for what it's worth, today ended higher. The Japanese market was leading the gains. Shanghai Composite, the Hang Seng, all of those indices were also up. Even European indices were trading higher, at least while the time our markets were open. Of course, all eyes are now going to be on the OPEC meeting that takes place in Vienna, and the possibility of further headlines coming in on the trade war issue. In fact, Nouriel Roubini as well as Jim O'Neill have told CNBC that a trade war will only make fragile economic conditions worse.
Okay, on to the third story then, and this is one sector which was down. Aviation stocks took a beating in trade. We had passenger growth numbers for the month of May, which came in. I mean, the last couple of months, growth has been extremely strong, anything between 20 and 23, 24%. The month of May, we saw that drop down. SpiceJet slipped the least, while InterGlobe Aviation, who flies Indigo, tanked over 7%. There was also other sort of bad news flow for InterGlobe. There was an enforcement directorate summon for the company's management regarding alleged violations of foreign investment rules. So it could be a mix of that and the sort of weaker passenger traffic numbers that we saw for the month of May. InterGlobe losing, as I said, almost 8%. Sonia, though, is now joining in with a quick wrap out of the traffic numbers. Sonia, over to you.
The passenger traffic growth for this month has been quite weak, actually. I mean, it's still a growth, but less than what we've seen in the past 20 months. So in the month of May, it's been a 16.5% growth that you've seen for passenger traffic. You'll see that graph. It's slowed down quite a bit compared to an average of a 20% growth we've seen over the past 3 months or so. Now, what has also happened this month is that fuel prices have risen, as we know. Crude is almost at $76 a barrel. So the companies have passed on this higher fuel prices to consumers in the form of higher fares. And because of that, demand has been a bit sluggish. It's around 11.9 million passengers. So the overall absolute number of passengers is still around that, you know, sort of 11 to 13 million unit, which is not bad. It's just that the growth rates have started to slow down a bit. In terms of market share, Indigo's market share has actually picked up. It stands at plus 40% now, and a couple of the others have lost a bit of ground. But overall, I think it's the slowdown in the passenger traffic that is a bit of a concern.
All right, thanks very much, Sonia, for wrapping all of that up for us. Let's move to a question that we're getting on one of the aviation stocks. Neeraj Kumar has written in. He's got 105 shares of InterGlobe Aviation, bought them at a price of 1,100 rupees. So you'd be a worried person seeing the fall. He's been holding on for 2.5 years. He's wondering what to do now. Okay, Gaurang, this would be really painful, right? You've seen such great highs, and then now you're seeing the stock tumble down. What would your advice be? Because today, I mean, there was added negative news on InterGlobe in the form of this ED inquiry.
Hi, Surabhi. Good evening to all of you all. Well, this is the only stock, as a matter of fact, that we remain positive in the entire aviation pack. And we covered this particular stock right from the time it hit the street with an IPO. Yes, there have been news flows which were negative. One of them, which Prashant alluded to, the summons from Enforcement Directorate. Earlier, we had Mr. Ghosh signing off from the company, which also led to a correction when the stock stabilized and then recovered back. The thesis on which we base our positive coverage on InterGlobe Aviation is primarily on the Udan 1 and Udan 2 Yojana, which the government has come out with. And InterGlobe Aviation, if I'm not mistaken, has acquired close to about 8 to 12 ATRs to cater to these Tier 2, Tier 3 cities and improve the connectivity. The ongoing news flow may keep the stock under pressure from a short to medium term point of view, but long term we remain positive on InterGlobe. So I would advise a hold.
Would you agree, Mitesh?
To me, I think, you know, with this kind of fall which has happened, I think the near term and the medium term charts have come in under pressure. I think 1120 was the area where the stock had kind of bottomed out on multiple occasions. So maybe, you know, 1120 was mildly held today, but I'm not sure. I think it looks like it will break down in the next few days, and it could head towards targets closer to about 900 and 1050 and then 980. So I think there could be some more downside happening. The other thing is that if you want to be invested into a stock, I think this is not showing any promise or promising signs of moving on the upside. So maybe switching from an Indigo, I think, could be a good choice.
Of course, I mean, with aviation stocks, the one thing which will matter quite a bit is the OPEC meeting on Friday, Saturday. Imagine you come back on Monday morning, oil is down $3-4. And suddenly things start to look very different. We've got one more question on Jet. Ajit Chaudhary has got 150 shares of Jet Airways. He's paid 525 rupees each for them. Wants to know whether he should hold or sell. I mean, Jet's at about, what, 380 now. Gaurang, what would you tell Ajit?
Well, Prashant, no coverage specific on Jet, but yeah, I mean, the word of cautious or optimism would be what comes out of the OPEC meet. And if Russia and Saudi Arabia-led OPEC has to, start pumping a little bit more crude oil, then there is a likely possibility where crude oil prices will cool off, and that would translate into possibly a lower ATF, aviation turbine fuel charges in the Indian, subcontinent, and of course the entire aviation sector might rejoice that particular downward move in case if the aviation turbine fuel charges are likely to come down. But it's anybody's guess. Unfortunately, I can't comment on Jet because we don't have a coverage.
All right, fair enough. We'll take a quick break on that note, gentlemen. We'll come back on the other side and take more queries. But as we take the break, here's a market opinion that we got from Lawrence Belanco of CLSA. He tracks the technicals and remains quite optimistic on the Indian market.
You're looking at simple trend definitions, Nifty still in the uptrend, and to me the 50-day moving average around the 10,659 area for Nifty is key, and as long as that remains intact, your immediate bias is to the upside. It's probably worth bearing in mind if you look at the Indian market in dollar terms relative to the broader emerging market index, you've actually broken the downtrend of underperformance since the 2016 highs. So while the rest of emerging markets sell off in relative terms, India's holding in there quite well. If you look at Nifty banks, the uptrend is still there. We're still above the 50-day, and yeah, we have seen some hesitation at 27,000, which is just below the January highs. But even with this recent volatility, we haven't violated any of the short-term support areas or the longer-term support areas. We still have that 31,000 ultimate upside target, and we'd be looking at that 50-day holding the short-term pullbacks.
Welcome back. You're watching Markets Today Talk Back. We're in conversation with Mitesh Thakkar and Gaurang Shah to decode the market's mood today. Well, let's move to the next headline. Bank stocks made quite a comeback in trade. The Nifty Bank Index ended the day almost 1% in positive. Buying was, however, restricted to private sector banks. Many of the PSUs were still down as they await the Standing Committee's meeting on the power sector, which was postponed today. Well, we've got some questions on bank stocks now. Vikas Gupta has written in with a query on ICICI Bank. He's got 1,000 shares, bought them at 280. He has been holding the stock for 1.5 months. Wants to know if he should continue holding or sell out. Now, I don't know whether this is a trade or an investment that he's trying to do in ICICI Bank. But Mitesh, the levels, 280 is when he got in.
Yeah, so I think, possibly the good thing here is that the stock is now showing signs of some resilience on the upside. I think it's kind of weathered a lot of a storm of bad news. And I think around 270, 265 it's made a good bottom. I think on the upside, the first targets will be around 311 and possibly even 325, 330 can happen. So maybe he should hold on. I would be really worried about it because even if it goes down and retest the bottom, the downside is very limited from his buying price. 270 to 265 is hardly about 10-15 points. So hold on to your stock. I think in the next 2-3 months, I have a strong feeling, and it's my opinion that the stock will head towards 325.
Okay, we got one more question. Ramana has tweeted to us his question on Yes Bank. He basically wants to buy Yes Bank at current levels. I guess he wants to know whether this is a good idea. Gaurang?
Well, Prashant, long term, definitely yes. And I think even over here, the worst is behind us. Economic recovery resolutions under the IBC NCLT will throw in a lot of positivity for the entire banking sector. If the view is, 18 to 24 months long term, I would say definitely go ahead and buy. And even the downside is extremely protected.
Okay, let's move to our last headline on the show, and that comes from the pharma space. Good news is continuing for the pharma sector. Cipla today was up almost 0.2% after the pharma major received an approval from the US drug regulator for its generic drug to treat HIV infections. Ekta is joining in with the details on this one. Ekta?
Thanks for that. Well, yes, Cipla was a stock in focus in today's trade. It was mostly because of sentiment after a US FDA approval that really led the stock higher in today's trading session. So overall, it was the approval for an HIV/AIDS drug that they had received from the US, and it is a market size of around $100 million. In terms of the drug itself, it's not that big an opportunity, according to analysts, but it is the spate of approvals that Cipla has received in the past couple of weeks. So, for example, just a week or 10 days ago, the company had received approval for a cardiac injection drug, and in May, it had received 2 approvals, one for an ophthalmic solution product and the other for a breast cancer drug. So it seems as though the approvals from the US are picking up for Cipla, and that seems to have aided in terms of sentiment.
Thanks very much. I mean, since there is so much interest in pharmaceutical stocks, Mitesh, which are the best ones which look good, where the setups look good for more?
So I think if you look at a slightly longer term horizon, I think most of the pharma stocks look extremely positive to me. I think, Lupin, Sun Pharma, Dr. Reddy's all have shown signs of good promise on the medium to long term chart. So I would be quite positive on all of them. The idea would be that they've rallied a bit. So I think, maybe you would want to stagger your buying in the sense that you might want to buy it at a 3-4% kind of a decline. But I would suggest investing into all these top line pharma stocks, starting with Dr. Reddy's, Sun, Cipla, Lupin, as well as all of the pharma.
Buy a pharma fund, basically.
There are people launching pharma funds. Mira is launching one of them. So yeah, pharma definitely seems to be the flavor these days in the market, Prashant.
Okay, I think Mitesh and Gaurang, thank you very much, as always, both of you for joining in, and good getting that update from you. I guess it's a wrap here on this edition of Markets Today Talk Back. From Surabhi, me, everyone on the show, thank you very much for staying with us.